Okay, so as you know, the heart beats in rhythm 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. After surgery, it's important to monitor heart rate so that no new complications can arise. And to fully understand how an ECG works, it's pertinent to know the normal beat of the heart and what that looks like on a graph. So in order to understand that, it's important to know what blood flow is. So blood flow is circular, so there's no start finish. So if I take you through that, if we were to start in the left atrium, for example, blood would flow through the mitral valve into the left ventricle through the aortic semilunar valve and out the aorta. And then blood would then travel into the systemic arteries and then the systemic capillaries through the systemic veins until it flows back into the heart in the right atrium through the inferior or superior vena cava. From the right atria, it would go to the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve, up through the pulmonary trunk via the pulmonary semilunar valve, and then it travels to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries, capillaries, and then veins. Okay, so now that we know the pathway of blood, now we can understand how the blood moves. So the SA nodes, which are found towards the base of the heart, and they are made of specialized cardiac muscle cells called pacemaker cells, contain leaky sodium-potassium channels in their membranes so they contain more of these channels than that of the AV node, and for this reason, the cells near the base of the heart depolarize faster, causing the rate of electrical impulses to be more frequent. These electrical impulses are what makes the cardiac muscles contract, and which effectively pushes blood into the next chamber or blood vessel. So the electrical activity generated by the SA nodes is what is monitored on an electrocardiogram. Each step of the heartbeat is represented on a graph. It would usually look something like this. The P wave is showing atrial atrial activation or atrial depolarization, and the atria contracts at this time. The QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization, and just after the R wave is when the ventricles contract. The T wave or recovery period represents the repolarization of the ventricles, and atrial repolarization is not shown because it happens at the same time as ventricular depolarization. The segments in between the waves also provide some information. If the heartbeat is not normal, the irregularity would most likely be found in the segments of the ECG, like the PR interval, which is the start of atrial depolarizations to the start of ventricular depolarizations, and then the QT interval represents an entire cycle of ventricular depolarization and ventricular repolarization. So the pacemaker cells within the SA nodes are responsible for a basic heartbeat, but when complications arise, and the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, is able to modify the heartbeat. There are both sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions that innervate the heart. The postganglionic sympathetic fibers extend from the cell bodies in the cervical and thoracic ganglia to the axon terminals in the heart. The vagus nerve carries the parasympathetic preganglionic fibers from the centers in the medulla oblongata to the axon terminals in the heart. If at any time heart rate strays from the normal 50 to 100 beats per minute, the brain will send signals to release hormones to correct the irregularity. An example of arrhythmia is atrial fibrillation, or AFib. This is when the refractory period of the atria is made irregular due to the excitability of the vagus nerve affecting the parasympathetic nerves. Since the parasympathetic division is affected, this irregularity is more likely to be seen after periods of sinus bradycardia, or otherwise known as slow heart rate, caused by rest or digest in the parasympathetic division. When this problem occurs, chemoreceptors in the wall of the myocardium alert the centers of the medulla oblongata. Effectively, the medulla sends action potentials back to the heart to try and correct the problem. AFib is able to be diagnosed by an ECG. The beats per minute are very rapid, and the place where the P wave would normally be is replaced with more erratic waves. The ventricular contractions are normal, therefore the QRS complex is also normal. And the main irregularity is found in the PR interval as seen here. In order to correct the arrhythmia, doctors may inject calcium channel blockers, which effectively slow the heart rate.